Hey guys, and welcome back to another Disney and Draw. Today we're talking about Fairy Godmother, an Enchanter's Tale by Jen Kalanita. This book was released last year, so yes, a little late to the game this time, but much better than before. And it's supposed to be the first in the Enchanters series. I'm not sure if they are going to connect in any way, or if it's going to be kind of like standalone books with a enchanting theme, but the second book in this series actually did come out in September of this year, and that one's about Tinkerbell. So I do think we are going to check that one out in the future, but for now we will dive in to this particular book about everyone's favorite fairy godmother. For those who are new here, hello, my name is Hala, and I'm an author and illustrator, Disney fan, and future X-Men, so I do like to read and talk about Disney books. I would like to talk more about Disney in general, but that's for another day. Today we're just gonna talk about the book while I draw, and I don't know who I'm drawing yet. Honestly, as of recording, I don't know who I want to draw yet. I might honestly just do a portrait of the fairy godmother, not entirely sure, so we will see. It'll be a surprise to me as well what is going on in the background here. But without further ado, we have to read the book summaries to get everybody caught up on what this book is supposed to be about. Now, I borrowed the hardcover copy from the library, so the back of the cover has a very short paragraph, but the inside flap has more of a descriptive summary, so I think we'll just go over both, because I didn't look at the inside cover one at all, but I did glance at the back because it was just a very, very quick bloop in on the pretty cover here. So let me read that one first, then we'll read the longer summary. Before she created carriages out of pumpkins, fashioned gowns out of thin air, and conjured one-of-a-kind glass slippers, Cinderella's fairy godmother was a spirited 16-year-old named Renee Dubois. But how did a human girl become a fairy godmother? That's the back cover. On to the inside. Now that you have been enticed to pick up the book, let's see what really is going on. A fairy godmother is made, not born. Renee Dubois is determined to prove that fairies are real. A governess with a tragic past, Renee leans into all things whimsical when taking care of her younger cousins, teaching them all she's learned about the fae folk of legend, much to her aunt's chagrin. Yet when one of the children follows her into the woods one night and is caught in mortal peril, Renee has no choice but to offer herself in his place. Just when she thinks this is the end, she's saved by a mysterious duo who take Renee under their wings and bring her into the world of the Fae. So begins a life Renee hadn't dared to dream of, studying magic, forging friendships, and stumbling upon an unlikely romance. Renee is on an exciting path, but this new path is not without its own challenges. Renee longs to return to the mortal realm with the coveted title of Godmother, a dream that seems just out of reach, and her tireless empathy, as well as her boundless determination, might be just what she needs to become the fairy godmother the world will come to know. Alright, the summary's fine. It's still laying on the ambiguity to not spoil anything, but the only part that I was kind of like, that's a little inaccurate is her young cousin doesn't follow her into the woods that night that they're in danger. He actually runs out first and she has to go find him. So just a small thing to, ruin your bubble. But overall, it really kind of touches on all the little bits and pieces that we're going to go over. Now, for those of you who have been around and who've listened to the multiple Twisted Tale reviews that I've done up here, especially for those who are Jen Kalanita, there are certain things that I expect that I don't look forward to, and they have happened in almost every single book that she wrote for the Twisted Tale series, with the exception being her most recent Suddenly Super, which follows Violet from The Incredibles. That particular thing is shortening nicknames to 3 letters, even when it's very unnecessary. Ones that really come to mind that still irritate me is calling Pegasus Peg and Persephone Per in her Twisted Tale Go the Distance, which is obviously based off of Hercules. That trend did sort of continue throughout most of the books that she wrote where the unnecessary nicknames came out, right? I am so happy to tell you she did not do that this time. There was no unnecessary nicknames. And honestly, within even the first chapter, I was like, who is this? I did not expect this from Jen Kalanita. On the very off chance that she ever gets wind of this video, wow, you stepped up your game. Like, I thought Suddenly Super was a lot better than your earlier Twisted Tales, but Fairy Godmother is the book you were meant to write. It was so well done. The writing style was totally different. I think it was much more developed, much more descriptive, and much more, there's depth to it compared to the Twisted Tale books that she's written. So I was immediately, shocked. It just felt like a totally different author, but like very pleasantly surprised by that and very much into the story. Like, this was one that was hard for me to stop when it was like past midnight and I was still reading. I needed to put the book down. And this is my experience. Some of you guys may disagree. That is totally fine. Obviously, we're here to discuss and share our thoughts and feelings. And if you haven't read the book, definitely read it and form your own opinion, because every book is not made for every person. So in my humble opinion, this book was fantastic. We're going to go through quite a bit of it because I don't want to spoil everything, but we're going to touch on a bunch of stuff that really stuck out to me in the book. If there was any dislikes, I will definitely share those as well, but overall, would recommend, absolutely pick up this book, and I hope that Tinkerbell lives up to it, because now I have higher standards, or I guess higher expectations, Jen. So please don't let me down. So let's take a journey through the tale of the Fairy Godmother. As the little blurb mentioned, we're following a 16-year-old girl named Renee Dubois. She is governess to her younger cousins, as she has been adopted into the family after her parents died in a fire. So she's an orphan. Classic Disney. She's very much like Wendy from Peter Pan, in the sense that she still is very youthful, childlike at heart. She believes in fairies. She's teaching them about fairy circles and like offerings to the fairies and all that, which her aunt, who pretty much doesn't even leave the house at this point, but is much more that strict, no-nonsense kind of aunt, isn't a fan of. And this particular aunt is very much interested in marrying Renee off to a sort of wealthy friend of her husband's, I guess. Like, I think he's a merchant son, or no, he has a son, but he's a merchant. Like, he's an older guy. So this would be one of those marriages you don't hear about too much these days, but where it's kind of a marriage of convenience, where the guy's first wife died and Renee is young and healthy enough to possibly give him more children, but like, he's old, we are not into that, and Renee, thankfully, is able to escape that situation. Unfortunately, what does happen is that when they were caught in the woods with their fairy offerings by their aunt, like their younger cousin, we have Celine, who is older of the two. She's a little bit more level-headed. And then Raymond, who's the younger son, who's also good at sewing. This comes in a little bit later, but he hears kind of the plan to send Renee away. But he loves Renee. Like, that's his favorite person. So while they're all getting ready to welcome their guest of this potential husband for Renee, he runs out into the woods in the middle of the night to go, like, find a fairy circle and essentially make a wish to have Renee stay. With it being very, very dark, he does not necessarily find his way. Renee realizes where he must have gone and goes out after him, and she finds him in the river. Like a big tree had kind of fallen over, so he was holding on to the tree. You can picture the tree like running across the river, and he's just like on the edge. She goes out to rescue him. And this is one of the scenes early on where I felt the emotion was depicted very well. Not just the struggle, but just the scenery and the ambiance was done very, very well. And I did physically read this book, but I would really love to listen to this as an audiobook as well. I don't think my library has it yet, though, sad. But this was a really, really good scene that felt very grounded. as she's trying to rescue her younger cousin, and like the words that she's trying to say to him to keep him encouraged and hopeful that she's going to rescue him. She does manage to get him back onto the bank safely, but as a result, she is swept over the little waterfall, and almost dies. Like, pretty much she should have died in this situation, but two fairies that happened to be out at that time rescue her. And one of them, going against the rules a little bit, grants her a wish that makes her half fairy. Being half fairy, we soon learn that there are some complications. Even though she's part human, part fairy, she can go to the fairy realm and live forever. Well, possibly live forever. Not entirely sure. Like, she would definitely have been safer if she'd stayed in the fairy realm, because fairies like live forever, never, never, right? However, one odd thing about these half fairies is that anytime they return to the human realm, their aging is very rapid. So, for example, because we'll see it later in the book here, when Renee goes back, I think she's only back for like a couple hours, but she aged like 10 years. It's a very dangerous thing for a part fairy to go back to the human world, because they can essentially speed age themselves into death. Whereas in the fairy realm, much slower aging, much longer lifetime. The other thing is, there may have been issues with other part fairies in the past, so she's not, like, she's welcomed because she is at least part fairy, but they're all suspicious of her intentions and what she can actually do. So many of them don't want her to actually learn magic because they don't want them to, or want her to like take advantage of it. And the queen of the fairies especially is trying to keep an eye on Renee, because Renee and her nephew, who's one of the two fairies that rescued her, are getting along too well, and she doesn't want the same thing to happen to him that happened to her sister. So those things we kind of learn relatively early on, but being part fairy still gives Renee the opportunity to take up a fairy occupation of sorts, which up until this point has been like a very focused study. It's kind of like when you go to college, except for you don't get all the standard classes. They're like, you're a farmer, all you do is farming. You are a doctor, all you do is doctoring. You don't get any general art classes that you need to take. No, they're very much strict to the rules. And the way that they get placed is they use this very ancient mirror that kind of reflects back the fairy's role. But with Renee, it was showing so many different things that it like almost broke the mirror. And having the governing power to make the final decision, the queen, rather than letting Renee be a fairy godmother that she wants to be, and that was kind of shown in the mirror, she's like, no, you're gonna be a fairy circle. Was it a circle creator? Renee is assigned to the fairy ring corps. That's what it is. So essentially, she's part of kind of the squad that would go scout for fairy rings, create them, and that fairy ring works as like a beacon for other fairies who are going in between the realms. Now, this idea in and of itself is a little bit dangerous for Renee, because in theory, she can't really even go to the human world without risking aging. So it is a little bit odd that she was assigned to it, but I think they're looking at it as it's the least threatening magic for her to learn, to like create mushrooms and put them in a circle, which Renee does struggle to embrace her magic, because a large part of the fairy magic is amplified by your magic words, which can be like real words. It can be a little phrase. It can be a little ditty. Renee hasn't found that yet. So she's struggling. She does have potential. Like, her magic is very much tied to her emotions. So the more worked up she gets, the more chance she has of accidentally using magic to create a giant fruit that may or may not have almost squished other people and put them in danger. So she's definitely going through some struggles. I'm glad that it wasn't a typical, well, I wouldn't say typical, but you do get characters who are like suddenly good at everything, and I'm glad she is not that. She did have her struggles, not only figuring out like why they're trying to limit her, but like how to control her magic. And she herself, when she lost her parents in the fire, was saved by a fairy. So she believes she had a fairy godmother. So she doesn't know who that is yet. She's also trying to like uncover the mystery behind the most recent part fairy jewels. And it's not until they are researching in the library trying to help her study, they do find some more information about him. And basically what he had done was he took advantage of having the fairy powers, went back to the human world and like sold fairies to the king so he could have some power and influence. But of course his time in the human world was short-lived because he aged super quickly and basically died, while these other fairies were now also captive to the king, including the former queen, which is the current queen's sister. So her nephew, I feel like I should just put their names out there so I can stop saying the nephew and the queen. The queen is Marguerite. The nephew of the queen, who is also one of the two fairies that saved Renee, is Tresser. Tresser is kind of, he gives off the vibe of hating humans and kind of being a little arrogant, a little bit of that type that we all know and love, but secretly actually really likes the humans, and he was just being suspicious and standoffish because he's a boy. And then Marguerite's daughter, who was the other of the two who saved Renee, is Lune, and both Lune and Marguerite are seer type fairies, so they can use their boule to see into the future, bits and pieces, like if it's revealed to them. So that's why both Lune and her mother Marguerite have known more about Renee than they let on. One of those being that Renee would, in essence, affect the future of fairy-human relations. They just didn't know how yet. The last character worth mentioning, because she's very present in the books, is Nellie, who is a fairy godmother, or like was. She still is a fairy godmother, but she's now more of like the house fairy as well to Renee and Lune. So she's kind of like our elder guide in the world, who's also like quirky and fun. But they uncover the true history of what happened to Jules, and Renee is like, I'm not like that. I respect the fairies. I want people to believe in them and, you know, see magic in the world. But they're still worried what Renee could actually do, so they're not really giving her a chance until she has no choice but to take a chance. And what happens is, while Tresser and Renee are at a ball, so yes, this is where the romance develops, because Renee was kind of already attracted to him from the beginning, but also like it was one of those like, why is he so beautiful and so mean? So if you know, you know. But they were at the ball together, and all these fairies were being summoned away, and Renee hears a voice calling to her, and it's Nellie. Nellie got like food poisoning essentially, so she couldn't go to the human world to help her charge, because she is still a fairy godmother. But there's like this huge flood coming to sweep the city of Orlais, which is also where Celine and Raymond are living, Renee's cousins. Nellie kind of begs Renee to go help. Even though she wants to be fairy godmother, I'm also appreciative that in this situation she didn't just jump for it and knew what she was doing. She was kind of like, even though this is what I want to do, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how to use the wand. I don't know what spells are right. But she takes Nellie's wand with her, and the wand kind of helps her through the situation of rescuing her charge, who is gonna be very important to, again, the fairy and the human relations in the future, very near future, but also possibly giving a lineage to a very well-known princess that the story might have inspired, or inspired by this story. No, whichever way, take it and leave it. So Renee goes and helps rescue this girl from the flood. Again, this scene I think was also done really well. I like when things are realistic and grounded, even if there is magic involved. So I really liked how Renee had to handle the situation, saving Genevieve. As a result of her actions, where she should have gotten ripped a new one and dealt with by Marguerite, this actually reveals how selfless she is and how she can help essentially reveal her potential to become a fairy godmother. And so not only is she allowed to take other classes outside of the Ring Corps, but she's finally able to pursue her dream of becoming a fairy godmother and learning the proper spells and like situations for things to do, because even though Nellie had been Genevieve's godmother up until that point, Genevieve asks for Renee next time Nellie goes to visit, and Renee assumes the position of Genevieve's fairy godmother. She only gets to visit her a couple times to kind of like get her in the right direction, get her to meet her man and fall in love. And then she has a baby named Ella. Yes, we know where this is going. It's Cinderella. Part of this probably being the maternal nature that Renee already had. Renee cannot stop herself from going to visit Ella as she's growing up multiple times. And as we mentioned earlier, the more time that she goes to the human realm, the quicker she ages. And they had gauged, based on her rate of aging, even with potions and certain measures taken to like slow that down, she probably only had 12, it was like 10 to 12 jumps to the other world. And she has spent most of those looking after this little baby girl and just like hanging out with her, and unnecessarily, like, she didn't need her fairy godmother at that time, but she's just building that relationship with Ella. And then it gets to the point where she's jumped so much that she really only has 1, maybe 2 jumps left. And this is when Genevieve, Ella's mother, dies. Renee ends up in like a depression from it. Ella father remarries. This is where the evil stepmother and stepsisters come in, and Renee like can't, for a while she's in such a depression she doesn't even realize what's going on, but it does take her a while to actually like see how poorly Ella's being treated, and then rise up to help her get to the ball, meet the prince and everything. So I think this is the only part of the story where I wish there had been more, because the transition from Genevieve to Ella, with Renee being her fairy godmother, and then that whole like depression after her death, finally seeing what's going wrong, and then coming back to help Ella get to the ball, was maybe in the last 50 pages. And I wish it had been 100 pages and given us a little bit more depth like we had gotten through the rest of the book, because I really think the visual imagery, the character development, and just the layers was so good. But the ending for me was just a little quick, just a wee bit quick. Like, all the stuff was still there. I just wish there was more. And I also like a little bit more of a savory ending where you can kind of indulge and celebrate where the characters have gone. But the last chapter for me didn't quite do that. We had another little time jump. And it seems like as long as Renee is in the fairy realm, like she's her younger self, but the second she goes back over, she ages, which is interesting, because I'm wondering how that affects her life as a fairy. Like, if she doesn't jump anymore, can she live longer? Does she stay youthful? Certain things I would like to know. But for me, the ending was pretty quick, but we do get a full circle, since the book kind of starts us right off at the point where she sends Cinderella to the ball. We jump back in time, and then we build right back up to that. So it was a nice little circle, put a little pretty bow on it. And overall, the experience was very enjoyable. This was definitely a book that I could binge read, didn't want to put down, and I am very much looking forward to the next one. Final thoughts. I feel like we just kind of went over everything, so I don't know if there's anything in particular to mention. I mean, overall, really, I'm very glad that I got to read this and experience this writing by Jen Kalanita. Like, this has definitely given me hope. Suddenly Super gave me hope. This has just totally taken it to another level. So again, I want to say, I guess, thank you, Jen, for writing outside the box. And maybe that was part of it. So I just realized I might have broken what I thought was one of my reading credentials to judge by. Because Fairy Godmother, in almost every sense of the way, is a prequel similar to Bemused, where we're not writing about the main character per se, but we are kind of leading up to those things happening. I still found this one much more interesting, and I can only assume it was the writing style. The writing style is very different between Jen and Farah. In this one, we had less point of views. We didn't really have like a main bad guy, which is always nice. but I felt like it concentrated the story a bit more on that character development. Like I think we had maybe like 2 different POVs. We had Loon on occasion and we had Renee. With both books, right from the get-go, I could kind of gauge how the story was going to feel, and this one did pull me in much more with its writing style than Bemused did. So I'm honestly curious now. Have any of you guys read both of these books, and do you agree or disagree? Because I generally don't like just critiquing, like overly critiquing books and just saying stuff I don't like it. I try to find stuff that I like. This one, I'm trying to find stuff that I don't like, and aside from the ending being a little bit quicker than I would have liked, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But it's still like prequel-esque, and Bemused was prequel-esque, and I just did not really enjoy that. But I don't... Let me know, guys. Let me know. Was I missing something when I was reading Bemused? Or do you guys feel the same? Because if we feel the same, then I won't feel as bad. I don't feel bad for it being my opinion anyway, but with the last 3 books that I've read, Bemused, Long Live the Pumpkin Queen, and Fairy Godmother, each one has just gotten better and better. So is it me? Now that I'm just contemplating my own thoughts and opinions, like I said, let me know in the comments below if you guys have read both of these, and if you have felt the same way, or if you disagree anywhere, because I like to have conversations about it and kind of discuss things that maybe I overlooked, or maybe I was just too excited to think about the consequences. Regardless, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but I want to thank you guys for checking out this video and hanging out with me while we discuss all things Disney. And the next book that I'm going to read is going to be Rebel Rose by Emma Ferralt, which is the first book of the Queen's Council. So we'll see how I feel about that. I know I'm a few years late to the game. It says it was published in 2020. And I think there's at least 3 out in the series. But we're going to start there. And also at some point we will get to Tinkerbell and Hour of the Pumpkin Queen. The second one in that series. In the meantime, if you guys have nothing better to do and want to know what my opinions are on other books, particularly the Twisted Tale series, I do have that linked up in the little corner there, as well as in the description, so you can check those out. Or if you're interested in checking out my own novels and manga, I have links to those below as well. Thanks again for hanging out, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!